So I currently work in Singapore, and I work in recruitment for a tech recruitment startup. I started my journey in my current recruitment role halfway through my working life. So I started off working with the broadcaster in Hong Kong, and then I moved across to Singapore with my company, and we were quite a big international company that was growing very quickly. And so I was interviewing a lot of people, and I quite enjoyed the interview process and talking through with people where their career might grow. And when I had my first daughter, I took a break from that role. I'd been in it for about 8-10 years, and I realized soon after being at home with my new daughter, although I loved it, I was quite keen to get back into my career. And so I went to a recruitment firm that I'd never even spoken to a recruiter before, and I was looking for a role back in the broadcast space, and they said they didn't have any broadcast roles, but would I be interested in working as a broadcast recruiter? In those days, broadcast was growing very quickly as well, and they were looking for recruiters to help in that process. And so I thought, okay, I'll give it a go. And I loved it. And I think one of the reasons I liked recruitment in that space so much was because I was familiar with the industry. And I think that helps, when you're doing recruitment to know your industry. And there weren't that many people in that space. And so I did that for a few years. I worked with various companies. I eventually set up my own company here in Singapore to do that, and continuing working with the same clients, and I loved it. And then my husband got an opportunity to move to the US, to San Francisco, and it was the second time. So we moved as a family to San Francisco, and I was there for 2 years. I did work for about 1.5 years of the time we were there in recruitment, but I didn't feel it was quite the same as it had been in Singapore. I think a lot of recruitment is about the relationships that you build, and that's very important. And so didn't love the experience there, but I think it's all part of the journey. And I don't regret for one moment being in San Francisco. It was a great learning for me. Most of my career, in fact, all my working life had been in Asia before that. But we did move back to Singapore, and then I joined my previous company, also in recruitment, and I joined to help startups flourish in Singapore. There's a lot happening, as we all know, in startups in Singapore, and so I stayed there for about 1.5 years. My boss left, and I am now working with him again in a company called Grit, working with technology startups in digital innovation and technology. And we've been around for my first day was the first day of lockdown in Singapore. So traditional broadcast has changed. When I was in a company, there was no Netflix, there was no iTunes. It was very much still all about content. And I remember going to meetings where we'd be discussing, what do we do with this content? It was sports. So I remember things like Premier League. We just had rights to everywhere in Asia. So way before, now every single country is very different, and rights are different. And with that, I used that when I moved across initially to broadcast. Digital was happening, when people were looking with people who weren't just looking to sell or didn't just know broadcast, but also knew digital. What can we do with our traditional TV rights for our content? And so there was a natural progression of people who were more traditional broadcasters who moved into the digital space. And then, and they were needed, and there was they had great opportunities. There weren't that many people who had that skill still in content, but were able to look at websites and digital, and even before, say, Twitter was on board. And it seemed to me the very smart people moved first from broadcast to digital, and then kind of moved over to tech. So then we had the Netflix starting and the iTunes, but still needing people who were familiar with how do we monetize all this content that we have. And I think that's just progressed very significantly. And then in regards to the move to Grit, which is a a technology recruitment platform. So, you know, we see now traditional recruitment is still there, but having a platform where your clients can go and look at, you know, people they want to hire, rather than always having a conversation with the recruiter, whether it's an internal one or they're using agencies. But in the US, for example, in Europe, there's very successful tech platforms where your clients would engage with the latest platform to look at how they hire people. And that's something that is slightly newer in Asia. I think often, you know, we look to the US, or even when it comes to the startups and how they're progressing and, you know, how they're funded. And then Asia, there's so much happening here, you know, and so much opportunity, that looking at ways that we can mirror what's happening in the US or in Europe often helps us. And that's what we're hoping to do at with this tech platform. And so, yeah, so I think that's another way that we've looked at, or that you look at, you know, the global dynamics to kind of modify or work with what's happening. And then I guess another kind of interesting area to look at, still in recruitment, but I think some people may think that traditional recruitment is completely gone, you know, that you will now, companies from the onset might hire an internal recruiter. You know, they have a certain budget to work with and they're in stealth mode, or they're looking to ramp up very quickly, and they think, oh, I must hire a recruiter to do that for me. You know, because we have jobs boards now, we have LinkedIn, but I think what'll happen is it's a hybrid. There's you'll use your LinkedIn, you'll use, if you have an internal recruiter, and you'll also use agencies. So I think looking at ways that we can, there are so many different tools nowadays, that using them together to in this case to recruit is invaluable. So what we do now is RAS as a service. So it's like SaaS, but it's recruitment as a service. So, you know, having someone who knows your brand is also important. So getting that person on board to help you hire is another way I think that that you can adapt to what's happening globally. And then, I mean, specifically in the last year, we've seen so much more remote working. And, you know, that in itself, it's, on the one hand, it's great because it opens up an opportunity to hire globally, even if you're in one country. You still need, recruitment is still required, more so possibly than ever if you're hiring someone in Vietnam, you know, because you need to ensure, or wherever it is, India, China, wherever, you know, that you still need to build your company. There still needs to be a culture. And so that interview process and hiring the correct people is, I think it's more key than ever now. But yeah, I mean, you know, we've all adapted over the last year and a half now to new ways of working. And yeah, I mean, hopefully it's working well for us all. Many people in many countries, you know, specifically want to look at recruitment as their initial career. I would say you'd really need to like talking with people. That's probably one key requirement. The actual being a recruiter, it's more because it's kind of, you're working in the consultancy space. There isn't anything, you know, in particular that you might need. However, within recruitment, there are so many different roles working in a recruitment company. So people who are researchers, you know, are interested in researching. They might think, oh yeah, I'm not interested in recruitment because I actually don't want to be front facing. I'm not interested in speaking to clients or candidates, but I really like kind of looking at resumes and, you know, seeking out people for certain roles, and then maybe, you know, passing that on to someone else. But it is, you know, often a recruiter is successful based on them having a really strong researcher who assists them. And I think, so that's one area. Also marketing. So we have quite a big marketing team. Some people might also think, oh, it's very salesy. I've never seen recruitment as specifically a sales role. I think it's very consultative. And I think, you know, people like that. And this is the ones that like speaking with clients and like speaking with candidates. It's very much, you know, what specifically does the client need and how can I assist them and how can I work with them. So someone, who likes speaking with clients is also, I think, important for them to consider if this is, an area that they would like to go into. Well, I guess to start with, key learnings in the kind of in the workspace would be, like I mentioned earlier, setting yourself apart or what you enjoy doing is a way where you can. I'm quite passionate about what I do, and I think some of that relates to, I do enjoy speaking to clients and candidates. I also really enjoy where my background was in regards to learning about broadcast and been able to bring that even now to my current role. When I was mentioning, a lot of people come from that background who've moved into digital and now moved into technology. And so part of that also comes from knowing the people that you're working with. So in recruitment, you're partnering with your client. So knowing the brand, knowing the person who has invested in you and said, I would like you to go out and find people for my company. So doing your homework is kind of, the importance of that is I think key and a really important learning for me, and that you don't just go, I'm being very grateful for the business that you've got and ensuring that you are representing someone else's brand when you go out and you're hiring for that person. So that's something that is important, and I guess connected to that is this whole, how important relationships are. Building on those relationships, and however long you're in your career, even if you're moving into a different industry, relationships are key. And I'd mentioned earlier, when I was in San Francisco, I didn't have those relationships. And I think that in itself, I began to look at, how important it is. And of course you start afresh and you build those relationships again, but understanding and appreciating the ones that you have and continuing, that relationship, regardless of how, if someone thinks, I might not get anything out of it now, at some point, it's just, I think it's a successful way that you can work, looking at those as key. I think I learned when I mentioned I left after I became a mom, and realized relatively early that it's okay, we're not all wanting to stay at home forever once we have a child. And so, I learned pretty quickly that I wanted to go back into the office and learn. And so, you talk about this whole having it all, or having a work, having a career and having a home life, whether it's with kids or without kids, but it's balancing that. And again, I think the last year and a half, most people will say it's been a time where we've realized we can, do many different things. You'll see a lot of people now say, but I'm at home working. That doesn't mean I'm going to be working 24/7. So we need to learn to balance. And I think for many people, they've learned to balance that over the last year and a half, and the flexibility of being in the office some days, being at home other days, but also being able to, shut it down and take a rest and not look at your emails. And I think for some people who weren't necessarily embracing, people working from home, and actually in the recruitment industry, there is that kind of element of you always have to be in the office. It has to be checked on what you're doing. For many people, they've had to look at their teams being now at home and wondering if they're working or not. And so I think for many, they've been able to appreciate that, if someone ends up delivering on what they're supposed to deliver, it doesn't actually matter whether they're in the office or they're at home. So that whole working from home, I think, has encouraged people to possibly be more mature. Like I read an article about, we're all grown-ups and people are messaging in saying, I'm not going to be in because I'm doing this, that, and the other. And, the kind of infantile element of, we're not going to preschool, we do need a sense of responsibility. And so it's very much now on the deliverables. There are many people who might be sitting in the office, but they're not actually mightn't be doing that much work.